On April 3, 2008, Eugene Voss walked into Heartland Ag Equipment in Bloomington, Illinois, and signed financing paperwork for a new Massey Ferguson 8690. The tractor was the flagship of Massey Ferguson's row crop line. 305 horsepower, Dyna VT continuously variable transmission, four-wheel drive, suspended front axle. The price was $198,500 after trade-in of Eugene's 2001 Massey Ferguson 8280. Eugene financed $160,000 over 5 years at 5.9%. Monthly payment, $3,080. The tractor was scheduled for delivery on April 18th. The sales manager at Heartland Ag was a man named Rick Tennant. Rick had been selling farm equipment for 23 years. He knew margins, he knew manufacturers' incentives, he knew how to move iron, and he knew that the most profitable customer wasn't the one who bought a tractor and kept it for 15 years. It was the one who traded every 5 to 7 years and financed the difference every time. Rick walked Eugene through the financing documents with the smooth confidence of a man who had done this 600 times before. He pointed to the payment schedule. 5 years. $3,080 a month. At the end of 5 years, the tractor would have roughly 8,000 to 10,000 hours on it, depending on how hard Eugene ran it. "Here's what I recommend," Rick said. "When you hit 10,000 hours, you come back in and we look at trading up. Get you into the next model. Keep your equipment fresh. Maximize your resale value. You hold on to these things too long, the value drops hard, and you end up eating depreciation you didn't need to eat." Eugene nodded. He was 52 years old. He'd been farming 890 acres of corn and soybeans in McLean County since 1984. He'd run Massey Ferguson equipment exclusively since 1991. He trusted Rick. Rick had always been fair, always delivered on time, always handled warranty work without arguments. Eugene said, "What happens if I run it past 10,000? Rick smiled. "Then you're throwing money away. But you won't. Nobody does. You'll see what I mean when you get close. The smart guys trade at 8,000. The cautious guys wait until 10,000. Either way, you're back in here before the warranty's even expired, and we're keeping you in current equipment." Eugene signed the paperwork. The Massey Ferguson 8690 was delivered 2 weeks later. Eugene spent the first day going through it the way he went through every new piece of equipment, checking fluid levels, testing systems, reading the manual cover to cover. The tractor was everything Rick had promised: powerful, smooth. The Dyna VT transmission was responsive, the cab was quiet, the controls were intuitive. Eugene put it to work immediately: spring planting, summer field work, fall tillage. The 8690 handled everything without complaint. By October 2008, the tractor had 890 hours on it. Eugene made his monthly payments on time: $3,080 in May, $3,080 in June, $3,080 in July. The grain markets were strong. Corn was at $5.80 a bushel. Soybeans were at $12.20. The margins were healthy. The payments were manageable. Then the economy collapsed. By December 2008, corn had dropped to $3.40. Soybeans fell to $8.90. The credit markets froze. Banks stopped lending. Equipment sales across the Midwest dropped 40% in 3 months. Eugene kept farming. He cut costs. He negotiated better prices on inputs. He made his payments. The Massey Ferguson 8690 kept running. By the end of the first year, it had 1,680 hours on it. In March 2009, Eugene brought the tractor into Heartland Ag for its first scheduled service. Rick Tennant walked out to the service bay and looked at the hour meter. 1,680 hours in 11 months. He whistled. "You're putting some serious time on this thing," Rick said. "That's what I bought it for," Eugene said. "Just keep in mind, the higher the hours, the harder the trade-in gets. You want to think about moving it before you hit that 10,000 mark." Eugene looked at him. "I just bought it 11 months ago." "I know. I'm just planting the seed. When the time comes, we'll get you into something newer, keep you current." Eugene didn't say anything. He paid for the service and drove home. If you've ever watched a dealership build its business model around keeping you in debt, around keeping you trading, around convincing you that the equipment you own is already obsolete before you've even made half the payments, then you know what Eugene Voss was walking into. And if you've ever been the farmer who refused to play that game, who decided to run equipment until it quit instead of trading it because a sales manager told you to, then you know what happened next. This channel exists to tell the stories of men who made the decision to keep farming with what they owned, who walked away from the trade cycle, who paid off equipment and kept running it long after the dealer said it was time to move on. If those stories matter to you, subscribe. We don't sell anything, we just remember. Now back to Illinois, back to Eugene Voss, and a tractor a dealer wanted him to trade before it ever stopped working. The Massey Ferguson 8690 accumulated hours steadily, 3,400 by the end of 2009, 5,100 by the end of 2010. Eugene maintained it on schedule, oil changes every 200 hours, filters replaced, grease fittings serviced. The tractor required normal maintenance, but no major repairs. In August 2010, Eugene brought it in for service. The hour meter read 4,680. Rick Tennant saw it and immediately started talking about trade-ins. "You're getting close to that 10,000-hour mark," Rick said. "Probably 2 more years at the rate you're running. We've got the new 8700 series coming in next spring. 320 horsepower, updated electronics, better fuel economy. I can get you top dollar on this 8690 if we move before you hit 10,000. Eugene said, "I still owe $42,000 on it." "That's fine. We'll roll it into the new financing, get you out of this one and into the next one. You'll barely notice the difference in payment." Eugene looked at the 8690 sitting in the service bay. The paint was still bright. The tires were at 60%. The engine ran smooth. The transmission shifted perfectly. There was nothing wrong with it. "I'll think about it," Eugene said. Rick handed him a brochure for the 8700 series. "Just keep it in mind. The sweet spot for trade-in is 8,000 to 10,000 hours. After that, the value drops fast." Eugene took the brochure. He drove home. He threw it in the trash. By April 2013, Eugene had owned the Massey Ferguson 8690 for 5 years. The financing was paid off. The tractor had 9,840 hours on it. Eugene had spent $11,200 on maintenance over 5 years. Oil changes, filters, belts, 1 alternator, 1 set of front tires, normal wear. The tractor was now fully paid for. No monthly payment, no debt, just a 305 horsepower machine that Eugene owned outright. Rick Tennant called him in May. "Eugene, I see you haven't been in for service in a while. Just wanted to check in, see how the 8690's doing." "It's doing fine," Eugene said. "How many hours you got on it now?" "Just under 10,000. There was a pause. Then Rick said, "You know, we talked about this. That's the point where you want to think seriously about trading. The 8700 series is selling really well. I can get you a good number on your 8690 if we move now." Eugene said, "Why would I trade a tractor that's paid off and running perfectly?" Rick's tone shifted slightly, more urgent. "Because every hour you put on it past 10,000 is costing you money, Eugene. The resale value is dropping. You're better off trading now while it's still worth something and getting into newer equipment." "It's worth something to me," Eugene said. "It's worth not having a payment." Rick tried a different angle. "Think about it this way. You're farming 890 acres. You need reliable equipment. What happens when that 860-90 starts breaking down? You'll be looking at repair bills that could have been warranty work on a newer machine." Eugene said, "It hasn't broken down." "It will. They all do, especially past 10,000 hours." Eugene thanked Rick for calling and hung up. The Massey Ferguson 8690 crossed 10,000 hours in June 2013. Eugene was pulling a chisel plow through a field on the south end of his farm when the hour meter rolled over. He glanced at it, kept working, finished the pass, drove home. The tractor didn't know it had crossed 10,000 hours. It just kept running. By the end of 2013, the 8690 had 11,680 hours. Eugene had put 1,840 hours on it that year. It was the most he'd ever run it. Grain prices had recovered slightly. Corn was at $4.40. Beans were at $13. Eugene planted every acre he owned and worked them hard. The tractor handled it. No breakdowns, no failures, just maintenance. In March 2014, Eugene brought the 8690 into Heartland Ag for service. The hour meter read 12,200. A different service writer checked it in. Eugene asked where Rick was. The service writer said Rick was in a sales meeting. Eugene nodded and left the tractor for service. Rick caught him in the parking lot 20 minutes later. Eugene, I saw your 8690 come in. 12,200 hours. You're way past the trade window. Eugene stopped and looked at him. The tractor runs fine, Rick. For now, but you're on borrowed time, and the trade-in value is gone. You held on to it too long. Eugene said, I held on to it exactly as long as I needed to. It's paid off. It works. I'm not trading it. Rick's face hardened. You're making a mistake. You're going to run that thing into the ground, and then you'll be stuck with a repair bill and no trade value and no way to get into something newer without coming way out of pocket. Eugene said, then that's my mistake to make. He picked up the tractor 2 days later, paid the service bill, drove home. He didn't go back to Heartland Ag for service again. Eugene started taking the Massey Ferguson 8690 to an independent mechanic in Normal, Illinois, a shop called Schaefer Equipment Repair. The owner was a man named Dale Schaefer, who had worked as a factory-trained Massey Ferguson tech for 15 years before opening his own shop in 2007. Dale didn't care about trade-in cycles. He didn't care about resale values. He cared about keeping equipment running. When Eugene brought the 8690 in with 12,900 hours, Dale inspected it thoroughly. This is a good tractor, Dale said. You've maintained it right, engine's strong, transmission's tight. You've got a lot of hours left in this thing if you keep taking care of it. Eugene asked how many hours. Dale said, I've seen these go 20,000. I've seen some go 25,000. Depends on how hard you run it and how well you maintain it. But there's no reason to think this one's anywhere near done. Eugene kept running it. By the end of 2015, the Massey Ferguson 8690 had 15,400 hours. Eugene had owned it for 7 years. He'd spent $18,600 on maintenance total. No major repairs, just normal service items. The tractor was still pulling hard, still shifting smooth, still starting on the first turn every morning. Rick Tennant called him in January 2016. Eugene, it's Rick at Heartland. Haven't seen you in a while. Just wanted to reach out. We've got some aggressive year-end programs running. Really good deals on the new 8700 series. I know your 8690's getting up there in hours. If you want to move it, now's the time. Eugene said, How'd you know how many hours it has? Rick paused. I'm just assuming. It's been 8 years. I'm not trading, Rick. Eugene, I'm trying to help you. You're running equipment that's depreciated to almost nothing. You're one breakdown away from being stuck. Eugene said, I'll take my chances, and hung up. The Massey Ferguson 8690 kept running, 16,800 hours by the end of 2016, 18,200 hours by the end of 2017. Eugene replaced the clutch packs in the transmission in early 2017. Cost $3,400 in parts and labor at Schaefer Equipment Repair. It was the first major repair the tractor had required in 9 years. Dale Schaefer told him the transmission would be good for another 8,000 hours easy. Eugene asked if he should be thinking about replacing the tractor. Dale said, Why? You own it. It works. You've got no payment. What would you replace it with? Eugene said, That's what I keep asking myself. In June 2018, Eugene was at the co-op in Bloomington when he ran into another farmer named Carl Dietrich. Carl had been buying equipment from Heartland Ag for 20 years. He asked Eugene if he'd heard the news. Eugene said he hadn't. Carl said, Heartland's closing. Rick Tennant got let go last month. The whole dealership's shutting down in August. Eugene was stunned. Why? Carl said, Sales have been down for 3 years straight. They couldn't move enough iron to stay open. Rick was pushing everybody to trade up, but nobody had any money. Grain prices were in the toilet. Guys were holding on to equipment longer. Rick kept telling people their stuff was worthless if they didn't trade by 10,000 hours, and eventually people just stopped listening. Eugene asked what happened to the customers. Carl said, Most of them are going to other dealers. Some are buying used. Some are just limping along with what they've got. Eugene thought about the phone calls, the pressure, the constant message that his 8690 was losing value, that he was making a mistake by not trading, that he was throwing money away. He thought about the $160,000 he'd financed in 2008, paid off by 2013. He thought about the 18,200 hours the tractor had accumulated with only one major repair. He thought about the fact that if he'd listened to Rick and traded at 10,000 hours, he'd have been making payments on a second tractor for the last 5 years. And now the dealership that had built its business model on keeping customers in perpetual debt was closing because the customers had finally stopped playing the game. Eugene drove home. He walked out to the machine shed. The Massey Ferguson 8690 sat in the corner, covered in dust from the last tillage pass. The paint was faded, the decals were worn off, the seat was cracked, the steering wheel was smooth from 10 years of use, but the engine was sound. The transmission was fresh, the hydraulics worked, the tractor was still capable of everything Eugene needed it to do. He'd been told to trade it at 10,000 hours. He'd been told it was losing value. He'd been told he was making a mistake. But the tractor was still here, still working, still owned outright, and the dealer who'd told him to trade it was gone. Heartland Ag Equipment closed in August 2018. The inventory was liquidated at auction. The building was sold to a truck repair company. Rick Tennant took a job at a John Deere dealership in Peoria. Eugene kept farming. The Massey Ferguson 8690 crossed 20,000 hours in March 2020. Eugene brought it to Dale Schaefer for inspection. Dale went through it completely. Engine compression test, hydraulic pressure test, transmission function test. He spent 3 hours on it. When he was done, he told Eugene, "You've got a unicorn here. Most guys trade these things off at 12,000 hours because a dealer tells them to. You've run this one to 20,000 and it's still tight. Engine's good, transmission's good. You maintain it like you've been maintaining it. There's no reason you can't get another 5,000 hours out of it." Eugene asked what it was worth. Dale said, "To a dealer, maybe $25,000 if you're lucky. To you, it's worth not having a $4,000 monthly payment on something newer. You can't buy that kind of value." Eugene kept running it. In 2021, grain prices surged. Corn hit $5.60. Soybeans reached $13.80. Eugene had his best year since 2012. He cleared $168,000 after expenses. He thought about buying a newer tractor. He could afford it now. He could pay cash. But the Massey Ferguson 8690 was still running, still doing the work, still costing him nothing except maintenance. He decided to wait. By the end of 2022, the 8690 had 21,400 hours. Eugene had owned it for 14 years. The total cost of ownership was $198,500 purchase price, plus $31,800 in maintenance and repairs. Total, $230,300. A comparable new tractor in 2022 cost $420,000. If Eugene had traded at 10,000 hours like Rick Tennant had recommended, he'd have financed a second tractor in 2013. He'd have made payments for another 7 to 10 years. He'd have spent an additional $250,000 to $300,000 in financing costs and depreciation. Instead, he'd run the same tractor for 14 years, paid it off once, maintained it properly, and saved $250,000 by ignoring the advice of a sales manager who'd built his career on keeping customers in debt. In March 2024, Eugene Voss crossed 22,000 hours on the Massey Ferguson 8690. He was pulling a field cultivator through the North 80 when the hour meter rolled over. He glanced at it, smiled, kept working. The tractor was 16 years old. It had worked 22,000 hours across 16 planting seasons and 16 harvests. It had pulled plows, planters, cultivators, grain carts, and wagons. It had started every morning. It had finished every day. Rick Tennant had told him to trade it at 10,000 hours, told him the value would disappear, told him he was making a mistake by holding on to it. Eugene had run it another 12,000 hours past that advice, and the tractor was still running. Dale Schaefer inspected it again in April 2024. He told Eugene the engine was still strong, the transmission was still smooth, the hydraulics were still responsive. He said there was no mechanical reason Eugene couldn't run it to 25,000 hours if he wanted to. Eugene asked how many farmers Dale saw running equipment to 22,000 hours. Dale said, almost none. Most of them trade at 8,000 to 10,000 because a dealer convinces them the tractor's used up. But it's not the tractor that's used up. It's the dealer's patience. They make money on turnover. They don't make money on a guy like you who buys once and runs it forever. Eugene asked what happened to those dealers. Dale said, some of them figured it out and changed their business model. Some of them didn't. The ones who didn't aren't around anymore. Eugene thought about Heartland Ag Equipment, about Rick Tennant, about the building that was now a truck repair shop. He thought about the hundreds of farmers Rick had convinced to trade early, to finance again, to stay in the cycle. And he thought about the one decision he'd made that had saved him $250,000 and 16 years of debt. He'd ignored the sales pitch. He'd kept the tractor. He'd maintained it properly. And he'd let the hours accumulate until the dealer's advice proved itself wrong. Eugene Voss still farms 890 acres in McLean County, Illinois. He's 68 years old now. The Massey Ferguson 8690 is still his primary tractor. It has 22,340 hours on it as of October 2024. Eugene plans to run it until it quits. He doesn't know when that will be. Dale Schaefer thinks it could be 25,000 hours, maybe more. But whenever it happens, Eugene knows one thing for certain. He'll have gotten every dollar's worth out of that tractor. Every hour, every acre, every season. He won't have traded it at 10,000 hours because a sales manager told him to. He won't have financed a second tractor to avoid depreciation that never mattered. He won't have spent 16 years making payments on equipment he didn't need. He'll have farmed the way his father farmed, with equipment he owned, equipment he maintained, equipment that worked. And when the Massey Ferguson 8690 finally does quit, Eugene will replace it with something he can afford. Something he can pay for outright. Something he can run for another 22,000 hours if it lasts that long. Because Eugene Voss learned something that a lot of farmers never learn. That the most expensive equipment decision you can make isn't buying a tractor that's too old. It's trading one that's still working because someone convinced you it was time. Rick Tennant told Eugene to trade at 10,000 hours. Eugene ran it to 22,000. Rick's dealership went bankrupt. Eugene's tractor is still running. And somewhere in Illinois, on 890 acres that have been farmed the same way for 40 years, a 16-year-old Massey Ferguson with faded paint and 22,000 hours is still pulling a plow. Still planting corn. Still proving that the best advice a dealer ever gave was the advice a farmer ignored. The tractor that was supposed to be worthless at 10,000 hours just crossed 22,000. The dealership that said it had no value closed 6 years ago. And the farmer who refused to trade is still farming, still working, still running the same red tractor a sales manager told him was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It was the best decision Eugene Voss ever made. And the 22,000 hours prove it.